should do the countdown. Good morning, everybody. It is February 18th. We're doing our usual 10 a.m. Central Wednesday showtime. I'm actually in Orlando for the International Builder Show, so I'm coming to you live from the Marriott Airport, Orlando. So hopefully the Wi-Fi holds up. Really excited, though, to have Joe Cliggott here. Joe is a friend of mine, a king, a force in the Chicago architecture community. I think you pretty much know everybody. We actually never worked together, strangely enough.
No, we didn't.
We crossed paths, but I know what an influence you have had on the culture and teams throughout Chicago architecture firms. So thanks for being here, man.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Beautiful weather today in Chicago, so we miss you being here.
That's what I hear. I hear the snow's all melted.
It's going to be 60 plus today. Yeah.
Wow.
Florida weather.
Yeah. Do people go to work today, or everyone just stay and just enjoy it?
No, everybody gets outside. It's hibernation is over.
Absolutely. And you are currently studio director at HKS, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So Chicago office director and a principal, senior vice president, all sorts of random titles, whatever they'll bestow upon me. I'll take king, but I'm probably more of a prince. I don't know that I'm quite a king yet. I'm not.
Well, I mean, I would say you're also one of the most humble people in the world of Chicago architecture. Do you mind just kind of running down your resume? You got HKS, Stantec.
Sure. Do you want it in chronological backwards or forwards, Dave?
It's up to you. Up to you, Joe.
Well, I'll go from the past to forward. So I'm graduated from Penn State in 1994 in the midst of a horrible back end of a horrible recession from the early 90s. And I had several of my classmates from Penn State came out here and got jobs right away. And I thought, well, shoot, if they could do that, then I can do it too. So I packed up a U-Haul truck from Massachusetts, where I'm from, and drove the 1,000 miles and without a job, and didn't have a plan, didn't have a career in mind. I just was coming to Chicago because Chicago's the capital city of architecture. So what better place to be than Chicago? So a lot of fortunate occurrences and good friends and connections along the way. I've had a really a great experience being an architect here. And Peter Weissmantel, who's at longtime SOM principal, and now he's at Smith Gill as sort of a semi-retired status. I ran into him a couple weeks ago, and he said, "Oh, how are you doing?" I said, "I'm fabulous." And he said, "Oh, fabulous! Like, wow, what? Like, that sounds like amazing." And I said, "Peter, I get to be an architect in Chicago. Like, what could be better than that?" And he's like, "You're right. You're right." So if you start with that, and that's just, to me, I just pinch myself every day that I can work in an amazing city with amazing architects. It's very inspirational. So back to your question. So I worked for a series of firms along the way. I've worked for 3-person firms. I worked for 30,000 person companies, and was fortunate to end up at Lohan Associates, and then it became Lohan Kimberly Getch, and then Getch Partners. So I was there for 10 years, really the kind of formative years of my career. So probably from 3 years out of school to 13 years. So really when you became becoming an architect, right? Taking the exam, becoming licensed, but moving up and taking responsibility. So those were really special years, and working with a really great group of people to mentor me. So that's been hugely influential, that experience. And, it's like Dirk Lohan is Mies van der Rohe's grandson. And so I sat next to people who had worked for Mies, and it was like, oh my God, like this is the stuff that we'd studied in school. And these were guys that actually knew him and worked with him. Like how amazing is that, right? And so you're literally standing on the shoulders of giants in Chicago, especially, and feeling that history and responsibility. It's cool, really cool.
and then you went to John Buck, right? So I think when I started at Getch, you'd just gone to Buck
Yeah,
overseas.
so the John Buck Company is sort of an interesting developer. I know a lot of people, are critical of commercial clients, but John Buck himself is really a special figure in Chicago, and really a patron of architecture in the old-fashioned sense of the Renaissance of being a patron. He had had a history of only hiring Pritzker winning architects to do his buildings, which I thought was always sort of a fascinating approach. Um, and then in 1998, I started at what became Getch Partners, and Jim Getch was working on One North Wacker for a different developer, and the project happened to be sold to John Buck, and we sort of got sold with it. And so I don't know that John would have hired us otherwise, but we became part of the package deal. And the other thing that Buck had done was, like, they worked with an architect, and then they kind of went to the next architect. They just were just sort of churning through architects, again, in a patron way, but not in a long time supportive way. Well, we did such an amazing job on that first tower that they immediately hired us for the next one and the next one and the next one. So there was like a legacy there, and we did all sorts of projects. I mean, Steve Nillis, who was a mentor for both you and I, he designed John Buck's personal bus. And so it was like we were so close to them as a client, which was a wonderful experience. And so it happened in 2007. Buck had the foresight. I mean, this was before the Great Recession, but it was coming, and so people who knew enough could see kind of the skittishness of the financial system. So he started exploring international opportunities and got hooked up with a group in Abu Dhabi called Mubadala, who's a part of the Sovereign Wealth Fund there, doing development projects in the UAE. So they had the land, they had the money, they didn't have the experience, and so they had gone out and tried to find international partners, and so that's where John Buck International came from. And then I have a dry sense of humor, Dave, and I can be sarcastic, and so I was Buck was then my key client at Buck was this guy named Dan Jenkins. Dan was getting involved with this Abu Dhabi stuff because the Chicago work had sort of dried up, so he was working on it. He was then leveraging me and saying, "Hey, can you help me put together an RFP for some of these projects?" So I was still at Getch, working for Buck, helping them, advise them on this Middle East work. And I happened to be over in Dan's office one day here in Chicago and at One North Wacker. And he pulls me in. He's like, "Hey, I got some big news for you. My wife and I are moving to London, and so thanks for all your help with all this stuff, but we're leaving." And I was off the cuff. I was like, "If you need anybody to go with you, just let me know." And I was sort of kidding, and
Right.
He didn't really have a sense of humor, so he thought I was serious. And so probably the next day or that afternoon, I get a call from John Buck's assistant, Sherry, who said, "Hey, John wants to meet you in Greektown. Go in this back door. You're going to have lunch with him." And effectively, he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was, jump to the dark side of development, let's say, and but go to London and help oversee work in Abu Dhabi. And I thought, well, my wife, we didn't have any children at the time, and so it seemed like the perfect opportunity. I was, mid-30s, so now you got 15 years of experience. So are you ready to do something different? So we did that with the thought that we'd go for 2 to 3 years, and it worked out. It was almost exactly 3 years. The Great Recession hit that fall, which was shocking for everybody, and so we were stuck internationally doing that. At the same time, well, so that was in 2008. So we moved in 2007. So I was there with Buck for a year, and then after a year, they decided to close the London office because all the work was shifting to construction in Abu Dhabi, and we weren't interested in moving to the to the Emirates. We wanted to stay in London. My wife's interior designer at Gensler, so she had already kind of established herself there, and so it was kind of, let's stay in London. So I got a job with Raphael Vignoli's office in London. We were at the time about 75 people strong, and part of my rationale to go there was, so I interviewed at a lot of firms in London, and it was still kind of booming at this time. This was early 2008, so the crash was in the fall. So I interviewed at a bunch of firms, and what I liked about Vignoli, in addition to being this great design firm, and it was a U.S. firm with a London office, so I thought maybe I could move to New York or to San Francisco after this, and that they were also doing projects all over Europe and all over the Middle East. And they were doing all sorts of projects in a variety of typologies. And so I thought, well, there's no, like, you could see that it was getting kind of nervous financially, but you thought, well, maybe the housing market will come down, or maybe the office market will come down. But Vignoli, they were doing museums, they were doing lab buildings, they were doing residential, they were doing big mixed use projects in the Middle East. Stuff in the UK, stuff in France, stuff in Russia. I thought, okay, amazing. Like, none of this will all stop. Well, and sure enough, September, that all those projects stopped all at the same week. It was crazy. Luckily, the project that I was on was in Bahrain, and we kept going for another year. And so the office was able to sustain itself with a couple of key projects, Battersea Power Station, which I was a part of as well. So some of those key projects kept afloat the office, but we went from 75 people when I started in London. By the time I left, we were down into the low 20s. So we shed, 2/3 of the office effectively in the studio over the course of a year and a half. And so that was really challenging emotionally and stress-wise. And then it turned out, I got a call that said, and Vignoli was doing the University of Chicago Medical Center, a brand new hospital for them. They said, hey, we need somebody to come back and work in Chicago at this hospital. You're from Chicago. Why don't you go do it? Right. And what I really appreciated about that was, like, I could never do that today. Because somebody would say, well, have you worked on 10 other hospitals? Have you done any healthcare? I hadn't done any healthcare at that point.
Right.
And they were just like, yeah, you'll just go and you'll figure it out, right? You just go. And it was in a leadership role as a manager of the team. And it's like, well, okay, I've never done this, but, I didn't verbalize that. You just go, okay, well, it gets us back home. We're back in Chicago, we're still working for this amazing company, doing an amazing project. And so that's, and I worked with our good friend James Lancia, right? And so you get to know
Jimbo.
You get to know a whole bunch of great people there as well. So
because I think he got sent out from San Francisco office, right? To Chicago?
He did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because Vignoli didn't have a Chicago office.
They did not. So right? it was just for the project, right? Mm-hmm. And so So I was on site. Our team was co-located with the owner, which was a great experience. And so, taking the bus every day down to Hyde Park, and this was pre-laptop, so all the work had to be done, at the studio there, not at home or anything. So everything was in person, which is funny just to think about it now. And so at the end of that, it wrapped up in 2013. The hospital opened up, and we did a couple of extra projects. So I was the last rat on the ship and slid the key under the door and turned off the lights, right? And Vignoli offered me to go out to Palo Alto because James ended up out there at the hospital at Stanford. And so we thought, well, do we really want to move to California? My wife would quit her job. She was pregnant with our son. Then it got kind of weird on how we'd have to negotiate our salary. We'd be working directly kind of I didn't negotiate my salary with the hospital out there. And it was kind of odd, the whole situation. And so we just decided if we had moved to California, we'd sort of be kicking the can another 3 or 4 years, do another building, and then what? So we decided to settle down more in Chicago, and we had reestablished all of our connections and roots here. And so, your questions about culture and design. So I interviewed at three offices in the Santa Fe building, which was the architecture mecca. So SOM, VOA at the time, and Getch Partners wanted me to come back, but Getch wanted me to move to Shanghai, and I still have never been to China, and I wasn't sure that was going to be I loved their confidence in me, but I wasn't sure that I could do that. That seemed like a tall ask. SOM offered me a position, and then I met with VOA, and I could tell they were looking for something. And then when they met me, they were like, "Oh, but you could actually do all these other things too." And that was sort of an interesting dialogue that we'd come back to later on. But then I saw it wouldn't have been in the newspaper, Dave, because it was 2013, but I must have seen a listing for HDR looking for a managing principal. And I had never thought about being a managing principal, but I was like, oh, I'm sort of curious. I'll apply to this. I know nothing about this firm. You look them up, and it's an old firm from Omaha, Nebraska, and they do lots of healthcare. So I met with their president of architecture and kind of the head delivery technical guy. They came to Chicago, and the three of us had dinner. And I said, guys, I just want to be honest. Like I've done one hospital. I said, it's a big hospital, but I've only done one, and I'm not going to claim that I'm a healthcare person. So this is like, let's just get that out of the way right away. And they said, no, that we have plenty of healthcare people, and that's not what we're trying to do. We want to be a top design firm in the world. And I thought, oh, okay, that's a sort of interesting to ask. What does that mean? And I think about so now it's like I can go to Shanghai with Getch. I might be able to go to VOA and do something there. SOM wants me to come as a project manager, and the SOM was very tempting because I thought that I feel like I don't know everybody. I feel like everybody has worked at SOM, but except for me. So it's like, oh, maybe I need to have that on my resume, that experience, to understand their culture fully. So I was really tempted by that, but I also felt like the legacy there is so strong that I wouldn't be able to really influence it. And I felt like they're an all-star team, and the best I could do is like, could I keep up with them? And that would be the kind of challenge to me. But that I could stay there 30 years, and I don't know that I would actually move the needle at all. It would just be like, don't mess it up kind of thing, right? Which is what intrigued me about HDR was, hey, we want to do something. We want to move. We want to change. We want to evolve a culture. And so that was really compelling to me. And it was an extraordinary experience because I was part of, it was because of the scale, the president of architecture, he couldn't tell us how to do it. He just said, this is where I want the strategic goal to be, is like, we want to be recognized as a top design firm. And he allowed us at the local level to define what that meant and figure out how to get there. And what was nice is I was part of a class of new managing principals across the whole country. We all brought or created new design leadership. And so we really changed the culture of an entire company. And that was an amazing experience. It was, just to see that energy level across a big company like that, and really feeling like we're moving the ship and we're all on board and we're coming. So we took a place that was, and it happened, it manifests itself in a variety of ways. They had historically around the country been a very suburban firm. So all the offices were located out in the suburbs for a couple of reasons. They had this legacy of community hospitals. So it's sort of like you're already out there, you can reach it. And then the proximity to the office was right by O'Hare, because so many of them were traveling out to these rural and community hospitals around the Midwest. I mean, you didn't need to be in downtown Chicago. You want to actually be close to the airport, because that's where everybody is from the team was headed. But we changed that, and so we got the studio down in the Inland Steel building, which is has a great legacy of being a launching pad for a lot of firms in Chicago. So to identify yourself as a Chicago firm, you need to be downtown. So that was an act that shifts. And again, I wasn't doing that alone. Our LA office moved from Pasadena to downtown LA, right? Because Pasadena is not LA, right?
Yeah. So what does that team look like? So you said it was the managing principals kind of from around the country. So did you guys just all get together and work out what this thing looks like, what this thing feels like?
We were able to do, because each of our own markets and studios were unique. We were able to craft. We were each able to craft it what made sense in our market, as long as the overall vision was headed in the right direction. So, I mean, the Texas offices, for instance, I mean, they ended up on cover of Arc Record for a little fire station. And it was like, okay, now you've made it, right? You've been on the cover of an architecture magazine, and it wasn't for a hospital. It was for a small fire station. So now you're just like proving that you could do it. And so that was great, rivalry that is like, okay, they did it. Dallas, HDR Dallas did that. Awesome. Good for them. Now what can we do?
Did you guys redesign the structure as well? The hierarchy or your org chart, or was that?
Excellent segue, Dave. The organization didn't change, and I think that's where I describe it as kind of a chassis, and I think the chassis can be set up to be, and so we can jump forward to HKS. I believe that the HKS chassis is the most effective for delivering the types and scale and geographic reach for a firm of our size. And I think HDR is part of a bigger engineering company. And there were a lot of organizational changes that were done that always felt like they were done just for the organizational change and not necessarily for how would we best deliver for our clients. So there was, I was there 6+ years, and Chicago was in 3 or 4 different regions over that course of 6 years. And so there was a East Central and West, then there was a North Central, South Central, then there was maybe East and West, and maybe there was not. And so all of those things, you don't obviously change your location, you don't change your market, you don't change the team, but that kind of fluid organization, I think, can be a detriment to actually producing the best quality of work. So jumping ahead to, I then went to Stantec for 4 years, and now I've been here at HKS since October of 2024, so about 16, 17 months. We are set up and organized around our practices, which means if you're in the health practice and there's 600 of them, it doesn't matter where they sit. It doesn't matter what studio environment is. It doesn't matter if they're remote or in person. They're all part of that practice. And so all of the accounting, all the financials, all the marketing, everything is looked through the lens of a practice rather than by a geography. And so I've been at these big companies where they go the other way, where they look at the office. And so it's like, how is the Chicago office performing? And then what happens is you're sort of encouraged to only use your team, or discouraged from reaching out to other offices if there's an issue about revenue sharing or how that gets allocated. Because HKS is organized around practices, then you're just bringing the best, if we're doing, we're doing the Washington Commanders NFL stadium, okay? We're going to put together the team of the best sports architects that we have in the whole company, regardless of where they're happening to sit.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got 4 people in Chicago working on Commander Stadium, but they're also working with Dallas and LA, DC, Richmond, Virginia, so there's all these people scattered around the network, but because they're structured around the sports practice, all of the revenue is going to the same pot of money. So it's by creating it as a single profit center, it just changes the dynamic of how we work and how we deliver the projects. So I feel like it's the best way to do it.
Is that pretty unique in the architecture industry?
I haven't come across it.
Yeah.
So again, I think
it does seem, and again, I haven't really worked for, Getch is the largest firm I worked for with multiple offices, but it seems like, if you look at an SOM or something like that from the outside, New York and Chicago like compete against each other. Right. There's a lot of pride in the local offices. And then how do they, how do they divide projects up and say Chicago gets this one, or, if it's not necessarily in that geography. So, I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, especially now in the ways that we can communicate with each other and file share so much easier.
Yes. Now we set it up around typically it's either the principal in charge or whoever the project manager is will kind of own the project. So it will reside in Chicago, for instance. But again, because we're sort of practice focused rather than office focus, it becomes less of an issue. And so it's been really refreshing, and it creates a better environment for the studio, for the team members, because again, they're learning and being exposed to the best talent, whether they're sitting next to them or not. And again, I think the pandemic, the fact that we all have laptops and can work remotely, just sort of feeds into it. So we, again, I compare that to like my University of Chicago experience with a big CPU and a desktop tower and a big monitor. I had to go to Hyde Park to do the work. You couldn't work remotely. Now you can tap into the projects anywhere in the world, wherever you are. And so there's a gentleman from Spain is working on the Commanders project. And it's like our technology, our systems allow us to do that. And the fact that our practice structure, again, the chassis is set up where he's a sports person. Again, they don't care where in the world he is, because so it's not like his revenue is going to the Barcelona office and that, Chicago has to pay Barcelona some sort of fee to allow him to work that way. That doesn't happen. And so it just feels a much more inclusive by intentionality,
Now with, and I'm thinking through my younger experience. I worked for a couple different firms, and I worked on numerous project types. So the 2016 Olympic Stadium that never happened, as well as hotels, as well as firm and residential and multifamily, which was really good for me because I got to figure out what I was passionate about, which fundamentally is typically going to be what you're also good at. So with your younger hires, people out of school or in their first 5 years, do they have the ability to float around, or are they kind of locked into one practice?
No, we definitely allow the floating to happen. So that happens more at the studio level, where we have visibility and direct connectivities to someone. So that's a bit more of what my role here is as the office director. Is like we've got arguably 12 different practices, and so there's going to be movement through that, whether because of business, like a project's on hold, I've got people, instead of going up to the practice and trying to find a spot somewhere in the network, can I keep them busy just within Chicago, because I can see the team I'm sitting next to in a different practice is desperate for people. Well, it's like, okay, well, we'll just, you just take care of that way. Or if I've spent a year working on something and I'm really curious about what they're up to, can I make that switch? And that happens too. So it'll happen by your explorations and your career journey, or it may happen because of business circumstances. And then we certainly have people who have declared a major coming out of school that say, I want to be this. I want to focus on whatever it might be, right? And so we have those too, which is also nice because, again, given our scale, so we've got about 1,700 employees total. You're going to have people who are deep experts, and then you're going to have people who are sort of agnostic to a typology, but may have more of an interest of enclosure. And so again, you can span across multiple practices that way.
Okay, that's cool, man. And so, what is your 40-hour work week look like? Are you dealing with everything? Are you clients, other offices, your own office? Or are you focused mainly on your team internally?
A little bit of anything and everything that happens. So we've been in Chicago for about 15 years. And part of my remit was to have us better connected with Chicago. So that can take all sorts of aspects of just getting involved, whether that's through sports teams or events or participation in IIDA and AIA things. So that's just the exposure side. The client side, so business development across our 12 practices. And again, each one of those may have a different thread to pull. And some of those are less local, regionally, or nationally. So you can kind of, I can help influence that. And then it's just a lot of just helping to connect the dots with people so that they see beyond the studio and see those connections. And then we are trying to build a design culture, build a Chicago culture here that's uniquely ours. The company has been around for 87 years, and I learned when I started that HKS stands for Harwood K. Smith. So there was a man, a single person, not three people that started it. And it was him and his wife at their kitchen table in Dallas 87 years ago. But he was from Evanston, and he had gone to the School of the Art Institute. So he's a Chicago origins. But for many years, I think we were a Dallas-centric operation, and that too has changed. So we have a new CEO just started the beginning of this month, and he's based in LA. So this is our first non-Dallas based CEO. And the other thing is he's younger than me. So now I'm finally working for somebody who's younger than me. So now I'm the youngest child, Dave, and I was like the youngest cousin on both sides of my family. So I've always felt like I'm very youthful, regardless of how I may appear. I feel youthful. But now you realize, and you're like, oh, wait, the head of my company is like, could be 8 years younger than me. You're like, okay, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, once you start going to the doctor and the doctor's younger than you,
yes.
When I kind of cross that line, you're like, okay, I guess I'm not as young as I thought I was. But
right.
So that I'd love to just dig in, and I know we're running a little bit long here, but I'd love to kind of just dig into. Obviously, we talked about culture and culture building. Like, what are the tools? How do you do this? Because you are a cultural icon in the world of Chicago architecture, and I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but the culture of Chicago architecture is not always that healthy.
There is probably a deep history of that, Dave, which well, and I think that there is something to be said. There's we have seen the evolution of our industry. So I always, when I moved to Chicago in 1995, there were the only national firms that were here were headquartered here. So that an SOM or a Perkins and Will, this was their headquarters. There were no, so since that time, we've seen the rise of all of these national firms opening a presence here in Chicago. And so the Gensler, Canon, HOK, HDR, HKS, you name it, there's a whole litany of them. And so young architects like you and I, when we would have moved to Chicago now, it's most likely that we're going to end up working for one of these national companies, not a Chicago firm. Okay, so there is a cultural change there that's happened. And so the fact that I like sat next to people who worked for Mies, I think some of that legacy gets a little bit diluted or lost because of the national firms that, you know, may not be represented by an individual. Now, the other thing is none of these firms have the person's name on the door who's still there and who is still, you know,
Right.
When I worked for Raphael Vignoli, it was clear who the boss was. His name was on the door, right? He did all the design work. He owned the firm. It was just like whatever, and he was a super nice gentleman. But it was also a tough environment. But it was tough because that was the culture that they that occurred, right? I think the fact that, you know, people's names aren't on the door, there's less allegiance to the people as individuals, or like they just we won't tolerate the kind of behaviors that may have occurred 20 years ago. And so that, combined with these national companies with big HR departments, like we have to do things in a very different way. And I think that's okay. Okay. I don't think being abusive is where you get the best work out of people. I think you get the best work out of people when you empower them, when you encourage them, when you mentor them. So I think and I think, you know, combined with actually, we're not hand drafting anymore. I can't do the work that we do, right?
Yeah.
So what good is it for me to go yell at somebody about it? Because actually I have no idea, right? I'm not gonna, you know. So I think there's been that shift as well, right? I mean, I've had abusive bosses, but they were able to do the work in a pinch.
Right.
After they yelled at me, you know, they do it. And they might yell some more, you know.
So you kind of mentioned the HR stuff and still kind of focused on culture and mentoring. Do you guys have like, you know, an organized training programs? You guys do monthly reviews, quarterly reviews,
yes, we
annual
do,
reviews?
Yeah, we have a organized system that we do as an entire company, and that's been it's a new one that we just started last year. So now we're in our second year. We all felt it was super effective. What I like about HKS is that, like, there's this attitude of constantly improving things. So there's even in that, it was like, we're going to do this, and then we want your feedback about it. We want to we want to make it better. And so there were things that even just like the cadence of when it occurs during the course of the year, so that it can be those conversations can be influential on salary, bonus, and promotions, and so people feel like my voice is heard at the right time. So we're making those kind of adjustments, which again I really appreciate. And I would say, just a general comment about culture. I have this belief, Dave, that at different moments in our career, there's different environments that allow us to do and grow and be the most fullest of ourselves. And that doesn't mean that any one culture is the right one for any individual at that moment in their career. So you've got to kind of, when I interview people, and I do a lot of interviewing, it's like I'm trying to discover from them what's the right place for them, because it might not be with us, and that's actually okay. If I feel like there's a better environment for them to learn and grow and be the most complete person they can possibly be. I have during interviews, I've actually called other firms and said, I've got somebody for you, because I knew that like that environment was better for them than the one that I was offering. And I think that's an important part of it too. It's just you're trying to put together the right pieces for what you need at that moment in time. So like where we are in 2026, I'm looking to add to the complexity of our orchestra, right? And it's like, well, I need more of this musician over here. I need more of the drum section over there, right? And so we're looking very strategically at that. So it's like,
Well,
I've already got a full horn section. So if somebody comes along with a trumpet, I might say like, hey, you really should talk to another firm because they could use you. That's all.
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, again, like I never got to actually work directly with you. We just knew each other through other people. But you always struck me as someone that was very, very smart, very, a really good listener, a really just good natural leader, but also kind of fun, right? Which I think is a really powerful balance. Like I feel like you as a leader are very serious and very focused about getting stuff done, but also people smile when they're around you. Is that part of it? Like, how do you bring in the fun to the world of an architecture firm?
Well, I've also learned to do that in that I think how leaders show up in the studio feeds off that. And so I will not lie, Dave, but there has been times where if you bring too much intensity, that can actually be a turnoff to people because they may interpret it as being angry or upset or negative, and so you've really got to lead with being positive. So that's why I'm like, I'm going to be fabulous, and if I'm going to be fabulous, you're going to feel that I'm fabulous. And so instead of being like, well, I'm going to be intense, well, I can be intense too, but let's. So I've learned. I've been in this role now at 3 different companies. I've had the same role of kind of leading the Chicago studio. So I've had to learn learn lessons along the way. And that's okay too. Be self-aware, take it as like, okay, I can improve this. And now, oh, I get it. Right?
Yeah.
So like I have to dial back my sarcasm, my dry humor, because sometimes people will take it as like, oh, did he really mean that? And it's like, no, I didn't mean it. I was trying to be funny, but
I'm trying to work on that too, because it's, I'm the same way. I'm like, what am I doing?
Right.
Like, I'm just perpetuating more sarcasm across the office. And then they don't know if I'm mad at them or just, making a little joke because I like to joke. So I'm right there with you. I'm trying to smile more and and sarcasm can be taken as passive aggressive.
Yes.
And I can be passive aggressive, and it's not really a healthy thing as a leader or really as a human.
No. And so I've had to learn to, and I'm from Massachusetts, and so I've got that too. I've got that. It's kind of built into my DNA. I will say the last, I had the pleasure of meeting Tom Main when I was at Buck. We were going to hire him to design a building in Abu Dhabi. And so I thought, oh my gosh, like I loved your work and like I'm a fanboy here. So I got to meet him in London. So we spent a good, hour and a half together, 2 hours, whatever it was. And he talked about the business and he's like, yeah, I have the studio in LA. And he's like, they just focus on the work. They're just designing. I'm the one that runs the business. Like I'm the only one that deals with the business side. And I thought, okay, Tom, I love your work, but you're actually not creating like whole architects there. They're just learning one part of the skill. And so I used a picture of Tom this week in presentations to the studio, Dave, that I've been meeting with groups of people because we're talking about compensation. And so I explained to them the history of fees in architecture. I mean, it was like mind blowing. Okay. Which is a whole rabbit hole that we can go down about why do we charge 5% of construction? Do you know this, Dave? Can I ask you a question? Do you know why we charge?
I do. I have no idea.
Okay. There was a famous lawsuit in the 1850s from Richard Morris Hunt against one of his clients in New York City. And he then had all this testimony from other architects about what they charge for drawings and specifications. And so this was then published in a trade journal. And so all the architects in the country saw, oh, we can charge 5%. And that has established kind of the 5% of construction is just sort of like this acknowledged thing. Anyway, so I use that.
I don't know that it covers it, but
no, that we can argue whether that's whether that was a good number. It was the number in 1850, and so now it's we're stuck with it. But then I explained, how do we get revenue? How do we establish salaries? What does a salary mean to the, our clients know what they have an idea of what a project architect looks like and sounds like and smells like and tastes like and what they would pay for it. They know what a project manager is. They know what a principal might be. They know what an interior designer or senior person looks like. And so the clients establish in the market what kind of that range is. So I explained all of this. And the reason I was doing it was I was trying to just, in 30 minutes, explain kind of our business so that it makes them better designers, because now maybe they've understood something else. So I'm not doing the Tom Main where it's just like, I'm just going to, train them to be great designers. I want them to be great architects, which is like understanding the fullness of this. So I think that's part of it too, is being very transparent. So when we give them their new salary for 2026, they know, oh, I understand how it all fits together, or at least I hope they do. So
yeah,
I take the time, and they're all like, yeah, nobody's ever done this before. Nobody ever explained it. And I'm like, okay, that's good. I'm going to take the time to explain it. And now hopefully you'll be better for it and better understood. And at some point, they'll all be in that shoes of being a principal or running their own company or whatever, and they might have a better understanding of it. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just pull back the curtain a little bit on the whatever secrets we might have, just to make them better.
I love it, man. That is good stuff. Well, I appreciate you hanging out here and running a little bit long, but Joe, just great to
see you, my friend.
Your voice, and love to have you back, and we'll dig into design fee. We got to go down that rabbit hole at some point.
Yes,
but I'm inspired, excited to see what you got. What are you guys doing in Richmond? Are you doing the new baseball stadium?
I mean, we have an office in Richmond, and we've had an office in Richmond for years. It might even be our second or third office.
Is that Nick Cooper?
Mike Dry is the office director.
Okay.
Great guy. And he's one of the head of our sports team as well. So
cool. Good. Yeah, I was born and raised in Richmond, so
yeah,
it's very cool. But yeah, looking forward to seeing what you continue to do over the years. And take
likewise,
care,
my friend. Good to see you.
All right. Cheers.
All right, see ya.